What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of our One Hood Power Hour. I'm your host, Royce Jones. Today, we're bringing you an election preview because tomorrow is the Pennsylvania primary election. We're going to be joined by some amazing and wonderful people who've been working all across Pennsylvania to make a big difference in all of our communities. A reminder real quick, though, polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. tomorrow. So make sure you have your voting plan so you can cast your votes and power up the polls. Tonight, our guests will discuss some of the issues that they've been seeing on the ground in their work and why these issues matter to you. So please join me in welcoming Kadida Kenner from the New Pennsylvania Project, Salim Holbrook from Straight Ahead Toward Abolition, and Steve Paul from One Pennsylvania. Later on, we're also going to be joined by Salima from Engage Pittsburgh. Thank you all for joining us. I've been saying we saved the best for last. We're going to get into some things today, so we appreciate you for joining us.
Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Yes. For sure. So first thing I want to do really is just get to know you guys and let the audience know a little bit more about you. So how about I'll start with Kadida. Tell me just about your organization and what you do.
Thank you. Ladies first. Hey, I appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. My name is Kadida Kenner. I'm the founding CEO of the New Pennsylvania Project. The New Pennsylvania Project is a voting rights organization founded in 2021 to expand the electorate. We center Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, the youth, and immigrant communities in our work. And so far, in the last little over 2 years, we have registered almost 40,000 Pennsylvanians to vote as our statewide organization continues to grow. And we hope to register even more than that number in this year. So happy to be with you all tonight.
Nice. I'm gonna toss it over to Salim.
Thank you. My name is Salim Holbrook. I'm the executive director of Straight Ahead Toward Abolition. Our organization primarily organizes communities most impacted by mass incarceration and community violence to contest for electoral power and elect representatives that will center healing as opposed to retribution, and more importantly, contribute resources to our communities that are underserved and underrepresented.
Nice. And Steve, what's your story?
Hey, y'all. My name is Steve Paul. I am the executive director of One PA. So One Pennsylvania is a statewide membership-led organization. So we mainly focused on basically shifting power from the hands. That's my daughter. Shifting power from the hands of corporate interests to those who are deeply impacted by environmental injustice, the shortcomings of our education system, and those who are impacted by the lack of affordable housing. We also do electoral work statewide, mostly focusing on voter registration, canvassing, and civic engagement all year round. And we do this in 3 counties, mainly Allegheny, Delaware County, Philadelphia County. And this year we're also doing work in Harrisburg, Dauphin County as well.
Nice. So all of you are tapped into the election process, the campaign process in some form or facet, and all in different ways. Let's keep this flow. I think we'll go in terms of like order, maybe we'll keep that the same flow for as we continue to ask questions. My first question really for everybody is, how has this one been different? I know you guys have been tapped into this work hands-on for a long time. So how has this time around been different from others for you?
We're going ladies first again.
Yeah, we're gonna keep the same. We're gonna keep the same flow.
Okay. All right, get my MC light on. Okay. So I'll say for me, I think this has been a sleeper, a little quiet for me. This primary election, I'll say. I've been traveling for a statewide organization, and I've drove through about 10 counties in the last 10 days, and I'm yet to really see a lot of yard signs popping up. I'm in Chester County right now. And usually my neighborhood is littered with signs all over the place. I haven't seen a single one. So I believe that the presidential election is still taking all the air out of the room. And I think that, the down ballot races really aren't getting the attention that they deserve. And I think this is pretty quiet. I would have expected to hear more noise at this point, and I haven't seen it or heard it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kadida. I'm going to echo that. We are seeing a lot of voter apathy right now, which is very concerning. I think there's several factors contributing to it in Philadelphia. I think some of those factors have to do with particularly the constituents that we have, where the areas that we work in are areas that are historically marginalized. And so there's always a challenge of getting them activated, getting them to buy in. But particularly at this moment, I feel like there's a question of why. Why should I? And does it matter? I think when we look at the presidential, there's not a lot of excitement for either candidate. I think this is really concerning just because what's at stake, particularly democracy, is at stake right now. So that's really concerning to me. And then when you look at some of the statewide races, now one thing I see a lot of energy in some of those races, right? So even though there's apathy, we are seeing, and when I say apathy, I mean apathy amongst the general people in those districts. But I'm seeing a lot of the advocates and people who are impacted by mass incarceration and community violence really energized to go into those communities and get elected. Someone like a Cassandra Green in Philadelphia in the 10th district, who is a community activist who has historically worked with victims of violence and also people impacted by mass incarceration. The only question I'm wondering is our enthusiasm going to be able to cut through the people's apathy? That is a challenge I think that we're all facing, and also making sure that I don't read our enthusiasm or our advocates' enthusiasm. That doesn't necessarily mean that's going to correlate at the polls tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll say that definitely resonated with me. So I think, well, first for me, like the way I think about this is in the context of like my own experience. I mean, coming as someone who's like, I came to this country from Haiti. So as a Haitian immigrant, like I remember the impact like the 1994 election had on my life, being able to come here after Haiti went through a coup and like Clinton invades, and I was able to come here. So like I always look at things from a global context, and I will just be a little optimistic and say like, I mean, I see a lot of excitement, not just in this country, but around the world. Like people are showing up and they're excited to be part of the process. And I think there's like a real recognition about some of these systems that have been broken for a long time. So like there's energy on like, right, like the labor movement, there's energy around like, yo, why do we have all this money for all these billions of dollars for all these things to go across the world, but we can't solve homelessness? And like, why is my grocery bill going up and I can't like afford to pay my bills, but you got billions of dollars to bail out airline companies. So like there's a lot of energy, and I think it's an opportunity for, I just think about this as an organization that does both like electoral work and like issue-based organizing. There's like a real moment opportunity to like bring people into relationship with our orgs and some of the work we're doing. And I've been focused on like, how do we talk about like elections as one tool so that people make that connection that like, we're not just asking you to vote. Like it's the beginning of a process, but there's like a bigger strategy at play. Cause like, I think both Salina and Kadida are right. Like the parties are just not equipped to do that. The candidates are not equipped to do that. And so it's like orgs like us that have to kind of like keep doing that work to make that connection. So it's a little scary, like, but it's also, I feel like it represents a good opportunity for us to bring more people into like, this work long-term. So we'll see and I've been telling folks like, man, whatever happens in November or April, or whatever, we still got to be here for the long haul and keep organizing our folks, right? So.
Right. Yeah. And I kind of want to tap into that a little bit more, because how do you keep people engaged? How do you keep people? I mean, a lot of for at least a lot of people who I talk to, it's almost like a trust thing. It's almost like people, when you constantly are faced with issues and hurdles and roadblocks and things, just there's no positive change for you and you're not noticing anything, people lose hope and they tend to give up, and they believe, because it's true, that the system is failing them, so then they don't want to buy into it anymore. So how do you keep people engaged and like charge them up to try to restore some of their faith that like change is possible and that, you know, you can make politics work?
I wish I had the magic answer. I will say organizations like ours, we're all leading grassroots organizations here. And I think the community trusts us more than they trust their elected officials or even candidates in this moment. And so I'll say that organizations like ours are important to be on the ground, to instill that trust, to reinforce that government can do good with good people in government. And I think that that is probably the most important thing in this moment, that you have organizations like ours that aren't aligned with a political party, not necessarily aligned with any political candidate, but are out here on the ground consistently, 365 a year, and not just ahead of an election, trying to get our communities, our own communities, involved in this political process. And I think that that's just speaks to the work that all of our organizations do that are represented here on this call today, is that we bring the truth, we bring the trusted messenger to our neighborhoods and to our communities and to those that we center in our work, so that when they hear from us, that although you may not want to do this April, or you may not want to do this November, that it is important that you do this so we can continue to have this conversation around us getting our needs met, and have folks representing us in political office that are going to assist in helping us to get our needs met. So I wish I had the magic answer. And I'll say that organizations like ours who will continue to do this work, as Steve Paul mentioned, if it's now or if it's next year and into 2026, we matter, and we just have to do lots of listening in the communities in which we center to find out what it is that we can potentially say.
Yeah, for us, we like to center that elections are not our destination. Rather, they are milestones or way stations on our way to community power. And so that kind of grounds us each election cycle. Another thing that's really important is making sure that you center, or rather for us, centering the leaders, centering the people most impacted by the issues that we're facing as leaders within our movement space, really goes a long way of keeping us focused on that destination, keeping us attuned to the people's needs and concerns, and recognizing that people are fighting for a change to their material conditions. And the challenge for us as organizers, as advocates, as people who are engaging and contesting within the electoral system, is to make sure that we can marshal our power to provide some relief or provide an answer to the problems that our communities are facing through the election cycle. So that's one way that we try and center ourselves in this moment, and not get caught up in, we have to vote for a Democrat or we have to vote for a particular candidate. For us, it's like, okay, how is voting for this candidate going to, one, capture our interests, make our communities better, and most importantly, how can we hold this candidate accountable to us? So we try and center those three concerns, or those three areas in our work during these cycles, because if not, what we feel and what has been our experience is you could become caught on the treadmill of electoral cycles and really just be out here for a particular party as opposed to the people in the community. You're muted, Steve.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that too, because I think for us at 1PA, like we similar to what Kadida was saying, like we do year-round organizing, right? And for us, we always lead with two things, because like we know our members care about housing, we know our members care about like community safety, because the issues we organize around, right? Like we know our members care about like the fact that they live next to an incinerator or they live next to a gas plant. These are the things or that, like they're seeing massive amount of gun violence and asbestos in their buildings. These are the things that they're dealing with. So it's hard. I get frustrated because it's often hard, like, parties and candidates will talk about something completely different than like what the actual people want. And so when you get a candidate that can talk about that, it really resonates with our people. So for us, we try to lead with like showing people what's possible through government. That's how we keep them engaged. So instead of just saying like vote for a candidate, we're like, yo, wasn't it dope that you got this $50,000 grant to fix your windows or your house, home repair? Here's how we got there, right? Like, because we're having multiple conversations with people, we can lead them on our journey to like, to go from like, this is how we got this legislation passed because folks stayed engaged. This is how we kept our elected officials accountable. And then we have a conversation like, all right, we need you to show up again, right? But it's like a journey, and we never lead it with like elections. The other thing I'll say is like, we're very clear that like elections is like crucial for us leveraging government resources that are like leveraging the only, and in my belief, the biggest resource we have in this country to actually change our members' like actual lives, billions and billions of trillions of dollars, right? And so we always lead and train our members like on that issue. And then the other thing I would say is like, we name the bad guys. We like, if you don't take part in the system, it's going to keep turning. And people who have billions of dollars, like millions of dollars, like Jeffrey asked, they're going to keep showing up and influencing the system against you, right? And so naming the bad guys, and that to me, those are the conversations that get people really excited to take part. It's like, oh, I can connect my terrible corporate landlord or this person to like actually me showing up to the polls. That's a different conversation than like vote for this person because they're going to save you.
And so when it comes to these elections, I know I heard a couple of you mention it's not about specifically the party, right? It's about the person, what they stand for, what they represent, what kind of change they can bring. What kind of like vetting process do you put on them, right? Like when you see somebody announce that they're running for an office, like what are some of the first things that you get to looking at, researching, trying to uncover, like what kind of conversations are happening?
All right, we're gonna have to come out of this order because I'm not prepared for this one.
I got you. All right. I got you. I respect it. I was looking for your lead on that one.
Look, I'll answer it this time, but then we're gonna have to come out of this order if we can.
Okay.
So I'll say this. So our organization, we don't endorse for the primary elections. We're not this year. This is something we'll probably change into in the future years. But I'll say we have put on candidate forums. Mm-hmm. And I know that when we have conducted candidate forums, particularly we did one for the Auditor General row office. And so the questions that came from our staff to go to these candidates were, how are you going to tackle a very specific issue? Mm-hmm. How are you as Auditor General going to ensure that funding is distributed appropriately to help our communities? How are you going to make sure that our elections are safe and secure and that you will not be tasked into doing something outside of your role when folks aren't agreeing with the election results? Mm-hmm. So for us, that it's an organization that is not endorsing during this primary election, I'll say that it's in the questions that we ask these candidates when we have the moment. I'm always my big question of any candidate is usually, what do you do on the weekends to help your community? Where can I find you on Saturday or Sunday in your community helping out? And if this is someone who is saying, I'm spending time at the Boys and Girls Club, or I'm in Kensington doing this, or, I am at my local church or place of worship doing this activity, versus someone who's like, oh, I'm out golfing. Like I want to know what it is you are doing in your off time, quote unquote, off time, to assist communities. So I'll pass the mic now.
So for us, we have a criteria broken down as movement candidate, progressive candidate, and then a defensive candidate. And what we define as a movement candidate is someone like a Summer Lee, someone like a Kahari Mosley, mm-hmm. someone like a Bethany Hallam, someone like a State Representative Rick Krajewski, Nikhil Saval, Cassandra Green, who's running now in the 10th district. These are people that started out in our movement ecosystem as organizers, as members, and then made the decision to run a consensus decision within our base, and we backed them and we supported them, and more importantly, they are still held accountable to us. But then we also have what we call progressive candidates, someone like what we feel as though is like a Keir Bradford Gray right now, who we feel is a progressive attorney general, right? This is someone who we believe their politics are progressive. They may not have emerged from our base, but there's someone that we've worked with a long time, and there's someone that's connected with our base. Helen Gim, who ran for mayor of Philadelphia, was also someone like that, and there's many others. And then we have what we call defensive candidates who, if we, for example, the governor's election last year was something that we felt as though we had to get involved in. We weren't super thrilled about Governor Josh Shapiro, but we realized that there were areas that we could work with him on, and his opponent we recognized was actually a danger, was actually a threat. So our movement consolidated and voted for him as a defensive measure. This is part of like our political education, and don't get me wrong, there, like, for example, it wasn't unanimous with Governor Shapiro. Some folks withheld their organizational endorsement, but still mobilized people in the streets. Mm-hmm. So that's one way that we break down how we approach candidates that are running for races. We really prefer to be in relationships with the candidates, but also for us, we really prioritize insurgent candidates. And what I mean by an insurgent candidate is a candidate that is running against the political machine, mm-hmm. a candidate that is running against the status quo, a candidate that is running to upend the status quo, and a candidate that has politics, particularly progressive radical politics, and is not a candidate who's just running because they feel important about a specific issue, or because they are on the perimeter of our movement and have come out to some of our events. So we have a pretty defined process. I will say, like I said, we really prefer insurgent candidates because our objective is to upend this system, dismantle it, and replace it with a system that is more responsible to the people and is answerable and accountable to the people. And so we build relationships with organizers and advocates and community members who eventually want to run for office with that mentality, or we align ourselves with political movements. One PA is a movement that we work with. One Hood is a movement that we worked with. And there's not always uniformity, but I do believe that in terms of where we are trying to go as a Black progressive movement, and I say Black progressive movement because there is a fallacy that the progressive movement is a bunch of white folks, when actually this is a Black-led progressive movement. And when you look at all of the our forerunners, whether it's in Pittsburgh, whether it was Carl Smith, who organized the steelworkers in Pittsburgh, was a progressive, right? Cecil B. Moore in Philadelphia was a progressive because they were upending the status quo, and we should be proud to walk in their legacies. So that's our framing, and that's how we deal with these issues of candidates and elections. And again, elections are not our destination, and that's something that we really make sure that we are clear on as we're building this power, because then you'll just find yourself, as I said before, just backing any specific party candidate.
Yeah, and I would say for us, I mean, we share a lot of the same sort of values as Straight Ahead. I mean, the one thing I will add to what Salim just said was, like, for us, you know, our theory of change is like the people closest to the problem have the solutions. And so that's why we deeply invest in the membership and leadership development, and like making sure our folks have a seat at the table. And so for me, I think for us, when we look at like who we're going to endorse, there's like a couple of things. First is like, are you from our communities? Do you understand some of the issues that our members go, right? Do you have the lived experience? I think a perfect example of like a movement candidate would be Kendra Brooks, someone who was a tenant who lost their house in the housing bubble, right? That's a movement candidate. Like, everyone's aligned. Like, we threw down for her both times, right? And then there's like movement adjacent folks who, like, you know, kind of get our policies, but they're not necessarily come from our movements, like Salim was saying, but we throw down with them. I think the other thing is, like, for us, and our members push us really hard on this, like, you cannot come to us for an endorsement if you like taking corporate landlord money, for example, right? Like, because our core issue is like affordable housing, and so you can't do that, right? So like, and our question is to develop by our members. That's the first thing. Say, will you commit not to take corporate landlord money? do take money from polluters. So like you really have to share our values before you even get to like the interview process. I think the second thing is like how does the person, because again, like we're all about like being part of the solution, right? Like how do this person look at governing? Is this like a top-down approach? Like, yeah, if you elect me, I got y'all, I'll do all these blah blah blah. Like there's like a transactional like endorsement process where like you promise to do a thing if we endorse you. Whether you're gonna do it or not, we don't know, because we might have to hold you accountable like literally the next day. Mm-hmm. And so for us, we really like, how does this person think about governing? I think a good example would be like Helen, right? Like, you know, Helen Gim, a council member who every time she had thought about one PA, a good example was like one PA literally expanded from Pittsburgh into Philly by working with Helen on Fair Work Week legislation to protect workers in Philadelphia. And that was like a collaborative, deep relationship that was built over years with our members and her. And so we asked people, how do they look at governing? And then if your answer is like, you holler at my chief of staff, et cetera, but like don't really understand co-governing, like then we won't endorse you. So yeah, I mean, it's just you interview questionnaire, and then like our members get to really interview you as opposed to like, you know, the staff or the board or something like that.
Yeah. I'm gonna take a bit of a detour. So bear with me with this one, and anybody can grab this, so we can shake it. We can really shake it up. But really, how we're curious to know what kind of anti-Blackness do you guys encounter in your work? Feel free to share as much or as little as you want on this, but what kind of anti-Blackness do you encounter, and how does that impact what you're trying to do and the impact that you personally are trying to make through your organizations? And if you need some time, we could also go. We could come back. I know this one's deep, so we can come back if everybody, we all need to think on that for a minute.
Steve, you want to go on reverse? Oh, sorry. I thought Kadida, you want to switch. I was going to say Steve.
Look, but this one I'm ready for.
No doubt. Oh, I know you is.
This one I'm ready for. You know, I had to think, how much can I actually speak on this, because the anti-Blackness could shut my Black behind down from continuing on with my work. So anti-Blackness, I mean, I'm a Black woman, so I got 2 strikes here going. Anti-Blackness is absolutely showing up in this election cycle. It shows up in our work year round. It shows up in, I'm just going to speak for myself and my experience in my organization of being a CEO. I might be one of the only Black women CEOs to lead a statewide organization in the Commonwealth with that title, perhaps, in this nonprofit advocacy space. And, you know, it shows up in how we are trying to fundraise for our organizations. It shows up in how we have to not settle for mediocrity in any of the work in which we do, to ensure that not only we remain an organization that can be funded, but those that are similar to ours and have staff who look like ours will continue to be funded. It looks like not being able to actually say what it is you want to say sometimes, because I saw on Facebook just the other day, one of the memes that, someone had mentioned, you're sent to the table you're meant to flip, right? You're sitting at a table that you're meant to flip, not just to sit at the table, just to have that seat at the table. And so when anti-Blackness shows up, we have to know when it is that we need to flip the table, so that we can bring about change. So anti-Blackness shows up in many ways, and I'll speak as a Black woman, and that shows up doubly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's just part of the work, particularly when you're in the political space. I'll say that as someone formerly incarcerated, Black being formerly incarcerated, that it definitely shows up in terms of access to resources, in terms of access to network, but then also just in terms of not necessarily being taken serious, because that's not a problem, but particularly whether you should even be in this space or in this room, or whether you are deserving of being in this space and room, right? Another area that has been showing up tremendously lately is over Gaza, what's happening in Gaza.
Yeah.
If you take a position on that, as we did, there are definitely consequences, and there's definitely a feeling that it's almost like, why don't you stay in your place?
Mhm.
And so for me, that was like, whoa, like who do you think you're talking to? You know, so I would say that it definitely shows up when you step out of the box, right? Or the political boundaries that they had set on you, where it's like, yo, you could talk about this and you're cool, but if you go near this third rail, then you're going to have problems. And right now, Gaza is that third rail in this movement ecosystem that a lot of folks are really trying to avoid, particularly when we see what's happened. Literally, there's genocide going on there right now. People are being mass murdered. And more than any other issue I've ever experienced, I don't think I've ever experienced consequences on this level to speak about what's going on in Gaza. And it's legitimate. And I've had many conversations with folks who has said, look, personally, I'm with y'all, or personally, I'm against this, but I just can't speak out. And I understand, again, because I've never seen consequences dished out the way I have seen the past 6-7 months because of Gaza. So I would say it really shows up there, particularly, why aren't you staying in your place? Why do you feel the need to talk about this injustice happening? So for me, if you're asking personal, and that's what I'm just sharing, for me personally, that's where it's really been showing up tremendously.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'll say four. I mean, look, we know this country was built on this very foundation is on anti-blackness, and so like it's not surprising like when our members try to get access to like government resources, they can't get it. It's not surprising when there's some issue being discussed in City Hall or the state legislature, like we're shot out of those rooms and we have, and often have to fight real hard to actually gain access, even if you're like, whatever, like a grassroots org, like you're like paid staff, you can't. And so it's even harder for our members. And I mean, I can't tell you the number of times where like we're sitting across the table from a lobbyist, and just like the treatment and the little slide stuff that they say about like our members like expertise, right? Like it's not coming from a book, but like them really like talking about their actual like lived experience in this apartment, or being a employee at Target, and how this policy, which direction of policy should go. And like, people are like, yeah, that's, you're just an employee at Target or whatever, but we've been doing these policy things across the country, and this is what we're suggesting will work, right? Like it's condescending oftentimes. And so, like doing the work of like changing policy, often like you'll see those kind of things show up. And I would double what Kadida said. I think in this space, in this movement space too, like, being very few Black EDs as a statewide org, it really sometimes can be tough. Yeah. So, I mean, then the last thing I'll say, like, some of these institutions like been around and have been doing and have been this way for so long, it's really hard to be the first or the only, especially in a place like the General Assembly, where like, you don't have to be Black to actually embody or like do anti-Black stuff. And so like when you are in big institutions that are built on white supremacy, even some of your own people, right, like kind of like make it difficult for you to like cut through that. And so, yeah, man, I mean, we see that, whatever, mayor, some of this stuff that we're seeing in Philly right now, right? Like what we need is more police. What we need is to lock our people and throw our people away. These are criminals. Like we're seeing that from a Black mayor. We're seeing that in New York, Eric Adams. Like, so, it's just, yeah, like just being like specific, trying to change policy. I've seen that show up in a lot of places.
Well, I appreciate you all for sharing that. I know it's personal. I wasn't trying to get too deep, or anything, but I appreciate it. I know it's deeply personal, but I think it's good to share, because so many of us who aren't in the political sphere are encountering anti-Blackness every day. And so it's, I think it's good to hear that the people who are fighting for us are also encountering some of these things, and just to kind of show that we're all not alone in that, and something that we're all having to deal with. And I want to go back to Salina, one of the things you mentioned, which was the situation in Gaza, and I'm curious, you know, and this is for anybody really. How do you think that is playing a role in this election? Do you think that is having an impact on people's decisions in terms of where political candidates stand on that?
I think it depends on where you sit. I think that there is a tremendous amount of frustration. There's also a tremendous amount of rage. There's a tremendous amount of grief and pain too. And I would like really center that grief and pain. I think that is contributing to a lot of the voter apathy. I think that the uncommitted movement is something very real. How it will impact the election is another thing. I'm not sure if it will have the steam to actually impact the election, but hey, I'm not a genius. I don't know it all. I just know that is definitely an undercurrent in the community. And Steve said something earlier that I think really sums up a lot, particularly for me when we're in Black and brown communities. While there is definitely empathy with the Palestinians, but also with Israelis, because I'm not going to there's people that I've spoken to who have empathy for both sides. What I hear the most is, why are we sending billions of dollars to Ukraine and Israel when Philadelphia public schools don't even have air conditioners in them, when they have asbestos in them, when our communities are falling apart, where we can't even afford not a house, can't even afford rent in Philadelphia practically, right? With just so many issues, people are just like, why aren't we getting any relief? Why aren't we getting any help? And so that's how I think it's really impacting, I don't want to say lay people, but people actually in the community, because they're seeing this. They're saying, wait, you're telling me we can't devote more resources to our schools, our recreation centers? We can't even get healthcare, but we have not billions, but we have practically over $100 billion have went to fund wars outside the United States. I feel like that more than anything has people frustrated and is contributing to the voter apathy, the voter anger. And also I think it also opens up for people to make, I don't want to say the wrong decisions, but you have people saying like, why am I voting for Biden when he's sending all this money overseas to rebuild these countries and communities, or pay for all these weapons, when I can't even pay for childcare and this and that? And then you got a crackpot like Trump over here criticizing that. And they're saying, oh, well, maybe this guy's for me. And it's like, actually, no, he's not. Like, he's not. I could assure you he's not for you. But it just creates those contradictions, right? That people in the community see. People think that people just because there's voter apathy don't mean voters are stupid, right? That's, because there's voter apathy because the parties haven't delivered. And so it's almost like that thing, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting results. Trust me, people are not stupid. So for me, this is what Gaza and Ukraine has really exposed, a lot of contradictions in the system that people are questioning now. Why isn't anyone looking out for us? That's what I'm hearing a lot. And that is very dangerous, because someone could step in and fill that gap, who can promise a lot. They're not going to deliver, but just promise a lot, and it could drive some votes elsewhere.
That's to anybody else. I mean, I just something honestly I would have never even thought of. So it's not even necessarily like a direct kind of thing, right? Like, it could be, this person could represent everything else that you hate, but that one issue they might have a stance on that, and then they sliding over here. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Sort of. I mean, oh, sorry, Steve, go ahead.
I mean, I was just gonna say. So, I mean, we knocked on about 70,000 doors, and we've been knocking doors since January. And talk. I mean, this is not just this year, right? But like, I'm just gonna be honest and say that like all of the conversations we're having are our folks. What we're hearing at the doors is like, I cannot, like, I'm like suffocating. I cannot afford. Like, why? If you're gonna come talk to me about voting, I need you to tell me how that's gonna get me a good paying job. I need you to tell me how my lights gonna stay on. Like, I need you to tell me how can you get my landlord to fix this basement that got mold and I can't get no response from him, right? Like, those are like the hard. And so for us, it's like focusing real deep on like, yo, okay, let's go after that landlord together. Like, what it means to organize as a community, the people in your building. 2, how is this connected to a bigger system? And like doing that work, which takes a long time, right? Like, I know, pundits or whatever, those things are not sexy conversations to talk about, but like that's the work we need to do to kind of bring people on board. And like, folks are just worried about like just the amount of murders that are happening in the streets. And these things have been happening like before Ukraine, before Gaza. And so I think the thing that's been frustrating for me is just like, not frustrating, but I don't want the conversation I don't want it to be forgotten. Like, soon we might not have any members in Philly because they're all going to be pushed out somewhere else, right? Like, we're losing a whole generation of people to gun violence. And so like, how do we not like let people off the hook in this moment? Like, call on Biden to like make housing an emergency situation, right? Like, those are the things we're trying to like, how do we leverage the power that we're building to actually get folks to be accountable? No, recognizing that this November we got to save this democracy that we have, right? But like, that's the thing I think we've been struggling and balancing.
I want to co-sign on everything that's been said, right? And say, to Salim's point, there's voter apathy, not because people are stupid, it's because they are smart.
Yeah.
And they are not seeing the changes happening. I mean, we knock on doors in Norristown, Montgomery County. I knocked on doors in McKeesport getting this organization going. And here I am knocking on the door looking for John Doe so I can talk to John Doe about getting registered to vote. John Doe's been deceased 5 years, which means nobody engaged John Doe's house in 5 years, right? I'm in McKeesport. I'm supposed to be going to doors that have ivy on the side of the house because that house has been in neglect for a certain amount of time. And so how do I go and knock on your door and ask you to join this electorate when I'm able to look into your house? Anthropology is my jam. Talking to people and enjoying people is my jam. And so I knock on your door, McKeesport, to get you to get registered to vote. And I see that you are living in squalor. And obviously that your landlord is taking advantage of everything that is going on. How do I then ask you? I want to break out and turn into social services, right? But I'm not there for social services. But how do you get somebody registered to vote who needs social services in this moment? And that's why so many organizations have moved away from some of the work that we do, right? Because they see the need that is different than even getting registered to vote. The need is getting people to live in housing that is safe and affordable. So, and I'll say this, speaking, we haven't spoken too much on the conflict, but I'll say this is that it comes for some folks, being able to vote uncommitted comes from a place of privilege where you have the opportunity to do that, where your life will still be the same after April 23rd, or your life will still be the same after November 5th. But there are some of us who will not survive into 2025 based upon policies that could come. And so being able to, particularly those who are of privilege, to be able to vote uncommitted in this moment, for me, as a Black woman who's cast a ballot every single election since I was 18 years old, I haven't had the opportunity to vote uncommitted or not make a decision because I need to protect my family. And there's so much to be said about, particularly as we're engaging folks this year and we're talking about the lesser of two evils. Okay, but let's also talk about who's going to do the least amount of harm in this moment so we can get through 2024 into 2025 and beyond.
I want to take a quick pause and welcome in Salima from Engage, Pennsylvania. Salima, we have you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, hi. Well, welcome to the chat.
Hi, I've been listening in on this wonderful conversation.
Yes, yes. Go ahead, and I'm gonna have you introduce yourself to the audience real quick.
Well, my name is Salina Suswell. I serve as the the National Senior Advisor and Pennsylvania Senior Advisor for MGAGE. MGAGE is the nation's leading American Muslim organization the nation's leading civic engagement organization working with Muslim Americans. And so we are doing the necessary work to get out the vote in Muslim communities across the nation, primarily in swing states. Most of our get out the vote work is nonpartisan, but we do operate as a family of organizations. So we have a C3 that is doing, nonpartisan advocacy and education. We have a C4 where we're doing more policy advocacy, and then we have a PAC where we're endorsing candidates that represent our values and needs as a community. So that's who we are as an organization. I also um, founded this year, well, the end of last year, I founded an organization called the Black Muslim Leadership Council. And the Black Muslim Leadership Council is doing some of those same things. Instead, they are centering Black Muslim issues and Black issues that American Muslims are experiencing in urban communities. So they're mostly domestic issues that I felt needed to be uplifted.
Nice. So we're all here, and I think that's a good sort of pivot into one thing we wanted to ask you, which was because you guys are all sort of in different like spaces within this like arena. Um, what are some of the top issues, maybe like top three issues that each of your communities that you represent are facing right now that are very vital and pivotal in this election that we're in?
Well, absolutely, Gaza. Gaza is a priority for American Muslims, and I think even individuals outside of the faith that are paying attention to what is happening are concerned about Gaza. I think it will be a very influential issue in the election. But also, there are domestic policy issues such as public safety and gun violence. Just a few weeks ago, at our Eid celebration, Eid is the holiday that we celebrate at the end of the month of Ramadan. We had a mass shooting, and some folks did get injured. And so, for me, public safety and gun violence is really important, but also economic opportunity and healthcare. I mean, all the things, economic opportunity, healthcare. I know that you told me three, so I'll stop there. But those are some of the things that are really important. It's hard to say just three, but if I had a top three, it would be um, definitely Gaza, public safety and gun violence as one, and economic opportunity.
I'm a popcorn somebody. No, y'all can jump in. Whoever.
I could just say like from even if I'm looking at this year, but like from the last 3 years, we've been knocking on doors and talking to folks. I would say the number one issue, not surprising, is housing. If you're talking about Pittsburgh, if you're talking about Dauphin County, talking about Philadelphia, like it's housing is always the number one thing. Sometimes like in other places, like education will also come up for folks, right? Like disinvestment in public education. And then it goes back and forth depending on where you're talking about. Like I feel like Pittsburgh, we've been here in education, and then in Philly, some of our surveys, the second would be outside of housing would be like community safety. And I mean, it's not surprising because like these are kind of all connected and are like connected to like generational structural problems in our country. So those would be the top three, and those are the campaigns we kind of work on. And just name that like. The thing I get frustrated about, I think I did this top hour, even though like community safety comes up, our folks are not asking for like more police, right? It's connected to the first issue, which is like we need better education, we need better housing, we need better jobs. And so these are kind of like the issues that have been circulating amongst our membership and like some of the surveys that we've been in the streets.
I would agree with housing as well. It's so hard to say the top three sometimes, but definitely housing is at the top of the list as well. I was remiss in not mentioning that.
Anybody else?
I could. Oh, go ahead, Kadida. I'll go ahead, dude.
Very similar to us as we survey the communities in which we're engaging. We do a lot of campus, community college, four-year college, HBCU college campus canvassing. Obviously, climate justice issue top of mind for young folks in this time. But depending upon the community we're in, housing is always going to be in the top three. As someone who leads a voting rights organization, I wish I could say it's our voting rights, right? But that's not top three. It's not. It's breaking top five just barely for us when we're engaging folks. And so, yeah, very much agree with what's been said so far.
I would say for us, it's a living wage, a job. Particularly like a lot of our folks are either people who were formerly incarcerated or family members who have lost loved ones to violence. Another issue is community safety. But echoing Steve's point that it's not about we want more police in our neighborhood. It's more we want more resources and more help for people in the neighborhood. And then also housing has definitely been a priority, particularly just like people can't afford a house or an apartment. And I do believe that there's like really a disconnect. And I would even go further and say maybe it's not even a disconnect, but you're hearing a lot of the new administration, Mayor Parker's plans to like increase housing in Philadelphia, particularly amongst Black folks. And like most people I have been speaking to have been like, look, I can't even afford an apartment. How am I going to be able to afford a house, particularly with these interest rates and the cost of housing today? So housing is definitely a issue that has come up. And another issue that has come up is as formerly incarcerated people being deprived housing because of convictions. And I'm not talking about just sex offenses, particularly when it comes to getting an apartment. Whether if you just have a felony conviction in your history, you can be denied or deprived of an apartment in Philadelphia because developers have essentially just built these huge multi-unit 100 150 250 unit blocks in neighborhoods, and they basically just use a private company just to run your information. And if you have a felony conviction, you are getting denied regardless to what. They're not even necessarily going to look into the offense. They're not going to call you. They're just going to say, hey, you came back pinged, and that's it. So for us, that's an issue that we've been experiencing, talking to people in our communities and particularly within our base.
I would just name too, one thing to point out too is like there's like a massive building, a corporate landlord in Philly called Odin Properties that we've been talking to folks about, in those buildings. And this is not just in Odin, but across the board. It's like living conditions of people who happen to have housing is like terrible in most cases, right? Like you got a bunch of slumlords, like saying these folks come in and build all these houses, but like they're not fixing them up and they're not upkeeping them, and they, causing situations where like the tenants pretty much are living in conditions that like no one would want to live in. So we've been fighting a lot to kind of like get some of the folks to get their apartments fixed, or like hold landlords accountable. But there's a large amount of people who do have housing and the conditions are just unlivable, to be honest.
Yeah. So these are all of the issues, right, that are facing people right now that people want to be addressed, that's important to them. I mean, like where does the election process come in? How does this election process have an impact on this? And maybe this will really help people as they like are making their decisions for tomorrow. And why this voting can help solve some of those problems that maybe they're encountering.
I'm gonna start with something real optimistic because I feel like we're all like, I mean, look, I think the election of like what we did in Philadelphia is historic, right? Like independent working families party taking out two people from a major party in this country, Republicans, right? Like we unseated two Republicans in Philadelphia and elected two working families party candidates. The reason we did that is because those folks, again, they come from our movement. They have our lived experience. Like Kendra's from Nicetown, has a story, has a background in like having housing insecurity. And I think we need to do kind of more of that and like, building up a pipeline of folks, our members and candidates who actually have our lived experience and are able to speak to our issues and that we can trust will do the right thing, right? Like Kendra's been taking votes after votes that like, I can go to sleep at night and know like that person's not going to sell me out. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to do a lobby visit with that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think like, we're going to continue to organize people in housing situations. And it's not just a one election. I think Salina alluded to this earlier. It's not just one election. I know it's hard not to get our heads around this election cycle, but like it's about continuing to organize. And I think all the energy that you're seeing around all of these issues are going to continue. And we just need to like, it's an opportunity for us to capitalize and continue to like bring more people into the work and telling people like election is just one strategy. Once we get these people elected, we got to keep on counting. And the last thing I say is like, no matter what happens, right? Like if we don't get our person, the work don't end, right? And so, we're going to, I know we're all on this call going to fight like hell to get as many of our folks out to vote, making that connection for them. And then the very next day, come back with a strategy on how to get these folks to actually do the things that are actually going to change the lives of our members.
I think there's a lot to be excited about. Look, I'm excited about summer in Pittsburgh. I'll be honest with you. I'm tempted to get on the plane, fly out there just so I could get to an election party, but I got a 15-month-old baby and my partner ain't going for that. So I'm excited about Summer Lee. I'm excited about the energy she brings and the clarity of her political vision. I mean, there's very few elected politicians who have clarity of their political vision as Summer Lee does. She is someone that is definitely a leader in this movement. I'm excited about the Attorney General's race, regardless to who your candidate is. The Attorney General's race is important. The Attorney General, particularly in this year, is someone that may be tasked with protecting democracy in Pennsylvania if the wrong person wins the presidency, right? So I'm very excited about that. And also I'm excited about Cassandra Green in the 10th district in Philadelphia, running out West Philly. Like I said, someone that came out of the movement, someone that dealt with victims of violence, someone that deals with people who are impacted by mass incarceration, is actually running to be part of that Black progressive bloc in the state legislature. I'm excited about Nikhil Saval running to be reelected. I mean, look, the Home Repairs Act delivered. There's very few people that could say that they delivered their first term. He delivered. I'm excited about Senator Sharif Street coming back. He's been a champion for second chances for people serving life without parole, but he's also someone who lost people in his family to gun violence. So he's someone that when we talk about that mass incarceration and violence, there's no walls in our community, that this issue weaves in and out of every family in our community. He's someone that gets it and that could talk about it. So there's a tremendous amount of excitement. But I also, it's sometimes hard to see that excitement when you look at everything that's going on and more importantly, all of the challenges that we face, because I'm very excited and we have candidates, but the thing is we need more. We need more of those type of candidates running in the future. We need to build up more of a Black progressive base, and also just a progressive base in general, so that we could start electing people that actually represent us, not just look like us, because there's a tremendous difference between the two.
Anybody else want to tap in on this?
No, I just wanted to add that a lot of I agree with Salim. A lot of those same folks engaged. Our PAC has actually endorsed Summer Lee. We've been making those phone calls and sending those text messages, and we've she has APAC coming against her. I mean, her, Jamal Bowman, and some other folks that they've literally put out $100 million, I think, in funds to fight against them and to try to unseat them. So there was a CNN article that just came out this morning saying that she defeated AIPAC and that her chances look really, really good, and Engage is excited to be a part of her village. And St. Nikki Savall, Senator Sheree Street, who is like a brother to me and just has always been a wonderful ally. These are some folks that I'm definitely paying attention to. And the primary elections are really important. I mean, for some folks, that will be the last stop for them, for many folks. And so we have to pay attention to cashiering as well, as you mentioned. And so there's so many people who I believe that can really ignite change in our communities and get some real work done. People who are sincere and have a track record of doing great work. So I'm really, really excited. But it seems like Election Day came really quickly, but here it is. And I'm really, really excited about what tomorrow will bring. And I'm also looking forward to just, once you get over that hump for the primary is when you really start paying attention to the general. And I heard what some of you folks said earlier, like about the uncommitted campaign. And Engage has been a part of the uncommitted campaign for Pennsylvania. And, I'm wondering what that will look like. The uncommitted campaign in Pennsylvania is not the same as it was in Michigan, for example, where, they will know on the day of election how many people voted uncommitted. It's a write-in. It'll take a couple weeks to count those write-in votes. So it won't be as impactful, but, I understand, the plight and the cause. And definitely, we've been doing the work to support and uplift the Palestinian community. But I'm looking towards, what will that mean for, post primary? I think that there are going to be some tough decisions that have to be made, about who are we going to, elect as president of the United States. I understand any tactics that you might utilize to leverage and put pressure on the administration in the primary. But now, after tomorrow, it's time to focus on the general. So what will that mean? And how will people navigate that? And what decisions will be made? Because there are only going to be, two options other than, third party and green. So it's like, it's only going to be a couple of options really at the center of this this race post primaries. And I'm interested and ready for the ride.
I'll close it up here and keep it positive. So everybody chose to keep it positive here as we're coming around to this April 23rd election. Is, there's a huge opportunity for some special things that could possibly happen here in the Commonwealth. I think about possibility of a first Black woman attorney general. I think about the first openly gay man to win a statewide election in Pennsylvania. All these possibilities that exist in this primary election. And I have not heard the term so much electability this year as you typically do during a primary season, the word electability. Well, I don't know if I'm going to vote for this person. Can they actually win the general election? Well, anyone can win the general election if we actually vote for them. And so if some of these movement candidates do win this primary election, then there needs to be some assurance here that people are going to come out in that November election and then vote for them.
Yeah, that said, sorry.
I just wanted to give a shout out too. I forgot him, and I know he's going to hit me up. Andre Carroll is someone that is very impressive, young, 31, 32 years old. It looks like he's going to be elected to the House of Representatives from Germantown, Steve Paul's district. Father was formerly incarcerated, captures all of the issues and is aware of all the issues in our communities. Also a young queer Black man. I think that he is a very exciting candidate, but more importantly, he's doing something that I'm not going to say everyone isn't doing, particularly candidates, but he's bringing young people out because of his youth and his energy. And I really respect that. And I think that we need to really figure out how to tap into more candidates, right, that could bring out the under 40 crowd, right? Because we all know that it's folks over 40 who are very reliable, but he has really been bringing people out in their 20s to canvas and work. And that's something that you really don't see often. So I just really wanted to give him a shout out and say we should be looking at a lot of younger candidates like that for the future.
Yeah.
I just wanted one more, because I feel like this is like, first off, I think it's dope that there's like young Black folks up down the ballot, like Andre. But I also want to shout out Ashton Commons, who's also running in House District 34 for Summerlee's all-state House seat. I mean, I can't imagine what it could feel like to have Ashley as your state rep, who we endorsed and been knocking on doors for, and then have Summer Lee as your congressperson, and then have Sarah as your county executive, talking about like an opportunity show like governing power from progressives and what it means to actually invest in people as opposed to what we've been used to, right? Like, which is like bring more polluters and please close more schools. Like, what could it look like with someone has the opposite approach? And that helps us in our work to be able to be like, this is what it looks like when you actually invest and stay engaged in the process. You can elect people like that. And so I'm super excited to see like this, like, I don't know what you call trifecta in Western PA, how that could work, with Mayor Gainey and like what that's going to continue to look like.
Yeah, I mean, and with that said too, I mean, on this positive sort of like track that we're on right now, are there any policies that you are looking forward to in the future? Really after this election, is there anything that you have your eyes on that you like? Okay, we can get some movement on this now.
So I will say for me, like going back to like 2020, it was some scary stuff to see, just like the January 6th insurrection. And I think it was a real moment of clarity for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But then it felt like folks was like, we dodged that one. But like, I think a few folks on this call could attest to this, but like, those same folks have been like working it the last couple of years, still running at the local county level, still running for board of elections, still like undermining school boards, still trying to undermine our process at every level of government. And so for me, the thing I'm interested in is like, how do we continue to protect, like I said, the institutions and the democratic process that actually worked on January 6th? Like, the courts did what they had to do. Elections were certified. Thank God, Vice President Mike Pence did what he had to do. But like, how do we continue to strengthen and empower those? And so like, expand the electorate and make sure people are protected when they're in their votes are counted. So for me, it's like, why don't we have pre-canvassing and why can't we start counting ballots way before the polls close? Why can't we have same-day voter registration? Why can't folks like have more drop boxes? It was amazing to see one of the first things that County Executive Sarah Amarato did was expand the number of drop boxes Allegheny County can have. And you saw Mr. DeMarco, who is a fake electorate, tried to sue her for that, right? So we still have these people lurking and trying to undermine her. And so for me, it's like, Speaker McClinton just introduced bill to get us same-day voter registration. So like those things, I'm excited as, we figure out the House of Representatives, how we like start to introduce more legislation like that. And, look, after the primary is over, like I really want us to keep thinking about what's the strategy to like make Biden take housing as a serious national thing, as opposed to, it's just feel like we've been working at all levels of, local, state, but like, I truly believe it's going to take a huge amount of like work and influence from the federal government to like actually get us out of this hole that we've been slowly, creepily heading towards. And so I think it's like, how do we think about housing policies that actually really stop some of the damage that we've seen over the last couple of decades?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have a laundry list. If things can go right here in 2024, I have a laundry list. So absolutely a Voting Rights Act here in Pennsylvania to bring about exactly what Steve Paul mentioned, which is same day registration and voting like they have in the progressive bastions of Georgia and North Carolina, right? True in-person early voting on machines. That could be a thing here. We could also maybe one day raise the minimum wage here in Pennsylvania. It's been quite some time. And if, the state Senate could look a little differently, perhaps we may actually raise our minimum wage from $7.25 an hour and stop being the embarrassment of the entire Northeast of this country. I think about opportunities for us to shore up our bodily autonomy, have access to abortion, and make sure that we codify that into all of our legislation. And we're talking about federally and otherwise. So that we can not have to worry about what could potentially happen on the Supreme Court if someone else is given an opportunity to stack the courts in their favor. I think about if we can finally put to bed all of this talk about us not having free and fair elections, if we can get the 87 elected officials who sit in Harrisburg who are election deniers, and yet they continue to win election and re-election, even though they took actions that promoted conspiracy theories about our election process. So we have work to do. Pennsylvania, I lovingly will continue to call the most northern and southern state. We had, so many, 87, 1/3 of our General Assembly considered to be election deniers, according to a report by States United Action. And so lots of work to be done. If we can change the way our electorate looks, we can change the way our state house looks as well. And maybe we can actually pass some legislation that will help the people.
I mean, I echo all of that. I think an area that is really important for us is actual decarceration and real justice reform in Pennsylvania. Second chances for people serving life and long-term sentences in Pennsylvania. There's over 6,000 people serving life without parole in Pennsylvania. I was one of them, sentenced to life without parole as a child. I was fortunate that a Supreme Court decision said children couldn't be sentenced to life without parole as adults, but there are so many people who are deserving of a second chance. End to long-term parole supervision. Over 32,000 people are on parole in Pennsylvania. Many of them are on parole for decades. That's something that we believe needs to change, as well as just general justice reform in Pennsylvania that creates more equity in a system that traditionally has disproportionately impacted Black and brown communities, and more importantly, has not made our communities any safer. So those are areas that we are really, in addition to what everyone else touched on, for our base, those are areas that we really would like to see some change in Pennsylvania.
Salina, anything from you that you're looking forward to?
That I'm looking forward to, you mean
In terms of policy, over the next few months following the election?
Absolutely. So we just had Black Maternal Health Week, and Black maternal health is one of our key policy issues that we're advocating for. Women are dying during childbirth at an alarming rate that are African American. So Black maternal health and maternal mortality is definitely something that I'm paying attention to. And again, I will reiterate, I will mention also again that policy around gun violence and public safety, I think, is going to be really, really important. We definitely need safer gun laws and just more action as it relates to just making our streets safe. Definitely in cities like Philadelphia. So that those are two areas that I'll definitely be paying attention to.
Nice. We get in towards the end. I could be here all night. Personally, I love listening to everything that you all have to say, but I know that nobody wants to do that. You guys are busy. You got things to do. So I kind of want to end things with this. If you could talk directly, to the voters right now, some of the people who you have all, made attempts to door knock and communicate with and engage. Is there anything that you wish voters knew about voting, about elections, anything that you can send them away with before the polls open up?
Can I start with that one?
Sure.
What I always like to just emphasize is that voting is directly connected to your experience in life, the way that you live, the way you experience life. I mean, voting is the way you make decisions about how your taxes are spent, how your tax dollars are spent, how education, what education looks like, what healthcare looks like, what the pothole down the street from your home looks like, voting the appropriate elected officials in office, or the elected officials that you deem to be supportive of the unique needs of your community. This is so very important. And so I encourage everyone to definitely get out to vote. Definitely always participate in elections, even when it's not a presidential election year. Voting is so important. And remember local folks as well. Remember the local races.
I think I will echo that. I think for me too, it's about self-agency. If you're not going to be making this decision, rest assured, when it comes to voting, someone else is going to be making the decision for you. So Yeah, I think that, sometimes it could be really hard because I understand as someone who was formerly incarcerated, someone comes from a community that has traditionally been neglected. But if we're going to work our way out of this mess, voting is one of the tools in our toolbox that we need to use. It's not going to be the one that solves everything, but you have to look at it as a tool in your toolbox to use to help us build our way out of this mess.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say, agree with what Salim just said. I mean, I feel like people who've been targeted by all the stuff we were talking about tonight, the systems, of oppression, the structural issues, they understand like power, they understand power dynamics and what power dynamics are at play to put them in a position there. I mean, they might not say it to you directly in the way you want, but they have clarity is what I've seen from like engaging with my members. And I think a good example of this is like when we did a focus group of like trying to ask folks like why they don't fill out the census or, why they don't engage in the electoral process. A lot of people had like different excuses, like, well, I don't want the government to have my information or people will be in my business. But when we started digging deeper and was like, yo, the census is connected to like schools, et cetera, in the electoral college. First off, our members wanted to abolish the electoral college because they were mad as hell. But they like started to like talk about like, why, like if the census is connected to like electoral college, if the census is connected to like the $40 billion the state's going to get from counted, then I'm definitely going to do it. I bring that up to say like, for me, it's like, there's been a lot of resources and a lot of money spent to keep our folks away from the process, right? Like they're not, I think we said this all out tonight, like folks are not voting just because part of it is like, yo, the system don't work for me. But like a lot of it is like people have, one, kept them away from the system, and two, have done a lot to make sure the system don't work for them. And so I feel like as an organizer, my job is to name the bad guy and, develop our leaders to understand strategy on how we got around it and talk about how voting is like just one tool, but like, what are the other solutions? What are the other strategies to use to actually really change their material conditions? So I don't know if that answers the question. I just think it's hard to be like, what is like, I think our people understand. I think it's just, there's a lot getting in our way is what I'm trying to say. And like, it's our job to like cut through that noise. You know what I mean?
I'll say, as the person who's leading a voting rights organization here in the Commonwealth, echo on all the things that have been said. And I'll say this, you may regret not voting in the election. So go ahead and cast the ballot so you don't regret not voting and having your voice heard. Primary elections is when you get the candidate of your choosing. And if you live in a place like Philadelphia or maybe some parts of Pittsburgh, the primary election is the general election. Who you choose to support here in this primary election will likely go on to win the general election in November. So you must go ahead out here today, tomorrow, or today if you're voting by mail. Make sure you get that vote by mail ballot into a drop box or to the Board of Elections office in their hand. Don't put it in the mail, it's too late. Go ahead and make your voice heard so that, your candidate of your choosing, who you believe is going to best represent you in the halls of Harrisburg or DC, is put into office. And, I'll end this on a positive note for us as an organization. After we register somebody to vote, we phone them within, 48, 72 hours after we get them registered to vote. And one of the questions we ask them, besides how was your experience of getting registered to vote by one of our canvassers, our community engagement associates, the next question we ask is, would you have ever gotten registered to vote had we not seen you in your neighborhood, in front of your grocery store, in front of your bodega, in front of the place that you worship? If we never engage you, would you have registered to vote? And the majority of those that we have as an organization registered to vote this year tell us they would have never registered to vote had one of our staff members approached them and asked them to do it. And so please take this opportunity to take not only yourself to the polls, but 3 friends. I know if someone has some very smart high school girlfriends and others, they still reach out to me on election day, like, what am I supposed to do here? Right. So don't think that not everybody knows that tomorrow is election day. We were out there yesterday Saturday in Montgomery County doing GOTV. I can't tell you how many people said to me, oh, I didn't even know there was an election coming up. So we can't take that for granted. We're kind of in this mix here, and there's a whole lot of people who are not. And so we can't take any of these votes for granted.
Yeah.
One more thing, y'all. Don't hate me. We ask everybody that comes onto the Power Hour at the end of the night one question before we leave, and that is, what brings you joy? I have to ask because if I don't, that's bad luck. We all gonna be cursed. So, what brings you joy? It could be anything. I just want to go around the room.
I mean, y'all hear it. It's my daughter, and
Yeah.
I'm in this fight for her. So
I would say the same thing, my children.
I'm going to say the same thing.
So I am without children.
I was about to say, I'm like, well,
I am without children. So I'm going to say it's everybody else's children. This keeps me in this work. Absolutely. Why I stay engaged in this work is all y'all children, to make sure that they are in this to win it.
Nice. Thank you guys all so much for joining in on this conversation. Where can people find you? Like, right, if people want to tap in with you, they heard something tonight, can we get some socials or something from you guys real quick so people can connect?
I am Salina Civics on everything. That's SALIMACIVICS, and just on X, I'm Salina Suswell.
I'm Salim Holbrook on X, formerly Twitter or whatever. Instagram. You can find me. You could also find Straight Ahead Toward Abolition on Twitter under @Toward Abolition, as well as Instagram @Toward Abolition.
you could. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I'm personally don't be on the socials, but you can find 1P on Instagram @1Pennsylvania. You can find the same thing for our Twitter handle and our Facebook handle. But my Twitter is young_advocator. And then my Instagram is Funkmaster04 from Funkmaster Flex. Yeah, so
Cool.
And I'll say that you can find out about all of our orgs, Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram at New Pennsylvania Project. Me personally, you can find me on X at Kadida Kenner and on Facebook at Kadida Natasha Kenner. And you can just do that because I'm the only Kadida Natasha Kenner in the world. So you're easy to find me.
Cool.
Yes.
Nice. And look, I don't really have to tell anybody where to find One Hood, because if you're watching it, you're already on our social media. So there's that. We want to thank you all watching on Facebook. We want to thank the YouTube viewers as well for tuning in tonight to this special election preview Power Hour. We hope you've been motivated, energized to show up to the polls tomorrow. Again, polls open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. That is 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Hope to see you guys out there. Thank you again to our guests for all of your work, for this discussion, for sharing your knowledge, for sharing your experience with everybody tonight. We all thank you so much and hope you have a great night.
Thank you. Look at the baby.
Royce Jones. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy of One Hood Media. Voting is an opportunity in my community because it gives us a chance to pick our advocates as well as our enemies so that we have the opportunity to build the conditions for liberation that we seek. Whether it's whether or not we have enough money for our sidewalks, if we're going to get tickets for speeding, or if we're going to be able to do community service, who we elect matters for our community. And so if you want better quality air, good schools, good jobs, and even the opportunity to take on your own mental health or reproductive health journey, you got to vote. And that's why I see voting as an opportunity in my community.